Ulabanaka, Fiji, and welcome to Gold FM Speak Your Mind. And, this afternoon we speak about an issue, that has been reported quite widely in the media and, of course, talked about quite a bit in various homes and around the country, and an ongoing issue. And start off with the recent deaths of women at the hands of their husbands and partners. And this has added to the ongoing reality of domestic violence in Fiji. And with me this afternoon, I'm joined by the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, Ms. Shamima Ali. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Now, you're no stranger to Gold FM Speak Your Mind, so we're just going to jump right to it. And this is an issue, like I said, ongoing domestic abuse. And, for some, they say, has this issue continued? How have we progressed in Fiji? Now, just the recent incidents have clearly reflects just how it is, what a situation we have in our country. Now, we've had the death of the journalist, Losana McGowan, and sadly, the death also of a young lady that was burnt by her husband in Lautoka. Now, the Women's Crisis Center, from what we hear, she had also been, she had reported the case to the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. Is that so?
Yes, definitely. And these are still shocking. And it continues to happen. And I think these two have really shaken us. But then we continue to have other cases. And fortunately, the recent ones we've had, an abduction and a beating and a rape by a former partner, de facto partner, and others, the women managed to escape. And, we'll be a lot more aware. Yes, it is really shocking. And we have had Domestic violence is an ongoing problem throughout the world. It's just not Fiji. And it is so ingrained, it is so entrenched in our lives, in women's lives, in families, in societies, in communities, that, that it's quite, we are not going to have an immediate end to it. Our vision is the elimination of all forms of violence against women. So we're not going to have, it's not going to stop by 2 years of awareness or 3 years or 30 years as we have done. It will take time, but there are other factors that do influence, how men behave so badly. Women coming into their own, more laws for women, more protection issues for women, more protection for women in terms of legislation, police, and so on. Mm-hmm. So men who are of that mind, when women start exercising their rights, so they're under a great threat, and they really don't want women like that. And once women decide they are going to have had enough, they're going to seek help, or they are leaving, that is when it's the most dangerous for them. And more men are resorting to that kind of extreme violence. And there are also some copycat ones, what is happening overseas, and it's reported, and they feel that they can do the same.
Now, let's look at that. You mentioned that the ongoing violence, and also looking at, we're looking at some, the last year, when we spoke with the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, he reported that there are a lot more cases being reported, but not necessarily mean that the cases of domestic violence have reduced, right? And now we're looking at more and more men being reported to be doing these types of violence, copycats that you mentioned. What do women need to look out for? What are the signs, and how do they know? And we'll also touch on why women don't report this. But what do women need to look out for?
They need to look out for controlling behavior from men, coercion, coercive behavior where women are under pressure to change. It can start when a man and a young man and a woman are going out together before marriage, and things like, monitoring how short her skirt is, changing the behavior, the dressing, who she talks to, her socializing, and all those things, trying to monitor and control that. How short her hair should be, who is she looking at, why are you looking at that man, do you know him from before? As soon as that starts, that is the beginning of it all. A man who is comfortable in himself, who's confident of himself, who is secure, and things like that, who's not insecure, will not bother about those things. He will like a woman, and he'll go after her, he will get her, and they get together. But those men who are insecure, these are the men who are really into the man-woman roles and starting the controlling behavior there. So look out for that. I always say to young women, Once that starts, run as fast and as far as you can, really.
You'd think that with the level of education and the exposure to various, other forms of, with television and also the information about domestic violence, abuse of women, you'd think that the attitude of men, would have changed.
There have been changes, but these men are watching other men doing these things. Like in our male advocacy, some men start admitting their bad behavior that they indulge in. And they will say, but I saw my grandfather doing that. I saw my father doing that. I don't know anything else. I don't know how to be with women. So they're watching and learning that behavior. Their role models are the males in their families. And they see the women in their families internalizing, taking it all in, enduring, and not speaking out. And that's the behavior they expect from women. So while we can say there is no excuse now with all this education, but no, what happens within the home, and then that's also in the community, it goes into our institutions, those things are very much still there.
All right, so these are factors that perpetuate these types of violences. Let's look at the family. Now, what other incidents from the case studies that the Fiji Women's Crisis Center have experienced over the years? Now, what are some of the other factors within that family? There's always the joke about the mother-in-law in the family. And there has been reports of mothers-in-law that actually help to encourage these types of abuse.
Yes, the mother-in-law problem. Yes. But you see, again, it's a gender issue. It's about gender power relations. It's about that. The discrimination, the inequalities, the way we treat girls and boys. This is the root cause. The gender power, unequal gender power relations, how men and women relate to each other, what our expectations are from girls, what our expectations are for boys, and this is what they are enacting, and they're pressurized within the families and so on to do that. So the mother-in-law problem, she most probably was treated the same way. So for once in her life, she has some power as the mother-in-law, as the matriarch. So remember, men make the rules. The women police it. And if they don't police it, there's punishment for them too. So make sure your daughter-in-law behaves well, your daughter behaves well. Anything goes wrong in a family, it's the woman's fault, the mother's fault. A child gets sexually abused by her own father or close relative. The first question they will ask is, why did the man behave like that? They will say, where was the mother? It's not her fault that the child got abused. It's the perpetrator who did it, who chose to do this. So often the onus is on the women to make sure everything is carried out. So this woman then suddenly finds some power, and the only power she can exercise is over the daughters-in-law. So whatever she went through by her mother-in-law, she will then perpetuate that, the same kind of behavior towards her, because she's got power and control here and things like this. So, so we also have to understand that, and that awareness also we are already doing and things like that.
Well, on that note, we'll take a short break here on Gold FM Speak Your Mind and continue the discussion right after this break. You can call in with your comments on 3220906 and 3220907 or flick us an email at goldfm@fbc.com.fj. Welcome back to Gold FM's Speak Your Mind, and we continue our discussion on domestic abuse and general abuse for women. And with me in studio, the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, Shamima Ali, and we've touched on a little bit about the cycle of violence and looking at the family. Now, what other are there? I'm sure there are other factors within the family that encourage these types of cycles of abuse.
Well, being married almost is like being beaten up is part of marriage, and sometimes religion, culture, all these things are used about submitting and all these kind of things. Mm-hmm. So, and that is taught to us from a very early age. And if women decide to leave a situation, those things are often used against her. If she goes to her mom's family and so on, they'll be sympathetic, but they say, please stay there, you're married now, and so on. And then Other women would say within the family, look, we went through the same thing, but we endured and so on. And people don't see it as a rights abuse. The cycle of violence is about, once it starts, you asked me earlier about what should women look out for. One slap, you must do something about it to stop him. If you let the one slap go, it's going to go 2 slaps, 3, then it's going to be the punching, kicking, and so on. The more you forgive him, the more power he has, the more he becomes confident that you will not report it to anyone. There will be no consequences for him. So the cycle of abuse starts with all the tension that is there. He is swearing, he is punching the wall, he's pushing you around, and so on. And if there's no intervention, then it actually erupts into violence, And I just wanted to read out something from our survey on the national survey, Somebody's Life, Everybody's Business. For the majority of women living with physical violence by their husband partner, the violence occurs repeatedly and is often severe, including being punched, kicked, dragged, beaten up, choked, burned, threatened with a weapon, or actually having a weapon used against them. This is Fiji, where women, when they were surveyed, they talked about this is how. And it is not a one-off thing. This is repeated violence, or the cycle of violence. So when we say eruption of violence, can be any one of these things. Then there is what we call the sorry or honeymoon phase.
Right.
There's some remorse. He might say, oh, I'm so sorry I did that to you, and I will never do it again. And the Vicks and the oil come out, I'll rub it. And he does things that he never does usually, make her a cup of tea or say to her, oh, we'll go and visit your mom, or I'll take you to the movies and things like that. And of course, she gets really lulled into a sense of security there. My husband, she still loves him. And so she forgives him. Then, now there's no other intervention. She forgives him. And then it starts again, and it goes on. And the more she forgives, it goes. So that's the cycle of violence. Then what happens is, once he gets confident, the tension period stops. The tension period stops. So it's just the violence and then the honeymoon, the violence and then the honeymoon. And then once there's no need to ask for forgiveness because she's there and it's going on for a long time, then it's only the violence, so the cycle disappears and you're only left with the violence there is. And that is the most dangerous time for a woman's life. So this is what a woman is experiencing. And the only way to break that cycle is to get some good, effective intervention. And the interventions come if she reports or leaves the relationship. She reports, and the people she reports to are effective and believe her, trust her, and also believe that it is wrong, that it's a criminal assault in the home. It's a crime. They have to believe that, right? Then she's going to get some help. Or the counselors she seeks are counselors who believe there is no reason for that kind of violence and so on. It's a human rights issue and so on. Or the man starts thinking that he is in the wrong. And there have been men who said, look, I don't know anything else. I know I'm doing wrong. How do I stop this? Few men, but there have been men, So if he recognizes he is the problem, not her, and he wants to change, otherwise she leaves the relationship.
Okay.
Those are the only ways in which we can stop the violence.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the people that the women report to. Now let's talk about that. Let's talk about the reporting. When they do report, who are they reporting to? And immediately, that's either a family member and also the authorities. Now, how effective, from the experience of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center over the many years, how effective have been our authorities with the cases of domestic violence?
Unfortunately, while there have been improvements, there are policies in place, there's legislation in place, and so on, the implementation of these, that is the problem area, how people respond using those policies, the legislation, the recognition of violence against women as a criminal offense. We're really still struggling with that problem. So you have periods where everything is good, and then you have periods where things go wrong. And over the last few years, things have gone very, very wrong. We have had, it also depends on who's at the helm, how interested is that person in this area of gender-based violence, because one of the things the police stats do show, and we haven't seen one for a long time, but when we used to get it quite easily, you could see that, when you talk about assault cases, the majority of those, and I think recently they released that the majority of assault cases, I think they said something like 70% was gender-based violence. Okay?
That's a big percentage.
Yeah, that's a big percentage. The majority of that is that it's not two guys beating each other up. They are strangers beating each other up. It's a man who's supposed to love and cherish and look after and protect this woman. His violence on that woman. That is what it's all about. So, but still, that whole attitude, the cultural, traditional attitude, it's a family affair.
I was going to ask, how does culture play? I mean, how have we
Yep.
changed
Yeah.
over the years?
Yeah.
We know how restrictive our cultures
Yes.
have been. It has changed, but what is our situation now?
Where women are concerned, sometimes it's like it's all cast in stone. We cannot shift it while everything else is changing. We don't follow the old methods anymore. When it comes to women and the violence and inequalities, that is when the culture, tradition, religious arguments are used most often. Lots of changes, a lot of the faith-based organizations are taking up the issue and so on, but still a lot more to be done. Within the police force, we're having a lot of problems at the moment, and we're talking about it. We are trying to address it. Some very good police officers who want to work with us, but those cultural attitudes we take into every place that we go. As a media person, if you did not know any better, you would bring that in, and that's how you will behave. In the same way, the police are also belong to our society. They take those things in. So a solid grounding at the academy, as soon as they are recruited and ongoing, that will change the mind. That is why we say, all right, the attitudes won't change, so legislate it. At least they will follow the law. But even that is not done, So we are finding that domestic violence restraining orders, which are with the new legislation, the new decree, it's easier to get, should be very easy, and more people have been empowered, have been given the powers to do that. But there is a lack of knowledge within police stations. Women are threatened. These are some of the challenges we have. And I also want to say, let us not disregard the very good police officers who are doing their job. But these are the challenges we have. So the DVROs, the women is told, I hope you're telling the truth, otherwise I will charge you for giving false information.
Is this still happening quite often?
Yes. That's why we have had to set up a legal services department at the crisis center, because our lawyers are getting out there trying to bail women out and things like that. The man comes in with a few scratches and says, she hit me, so immediately both are put in the cell. We've had instances like that. Or the man preempts the woman with a DVRO, and he's given one very easily, because there's an occupancy order too. If you get that, he can be ordered to leave the house. So he quickly gets that. The women find it very difficult to access the DVRO, even though the legislation is there.
Well, we'll continue this discussion right after this short break here on Gold FM Speak Your Mind. Welcome back to Gold FM Speak Your Mind. We're speaking of, domestic violence and violence against women. And with me, we continue our discussion with the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, Shamima Ali. Now, just before we went to the break, we were getting to a very interesting part about legislation and enacting the legislation and the challenges the Fiji Women's Crisis Center and also those who report to the police that they may face. And you mentioned you have quite a big legal team that have to deal with the reports. Now, backtracking a little bit, DVRO, for the benefit for some of our listeners and viewers, would you just explain the order of how reports are fielded at the police stations?
Okay. So it's called the Domestic Violence Restraining Order.
Mm-hmm. And what does that entail?
What it means is that it stops your partner, your husband, from coming anywhere near you, being in contact with you, all those things that keeps you safe. Not even a phone call, any of text messages, email, no contact whatsoever.
Some don't understand that bit.
They
and
don't.
Some women will continue to have contact with their partners.
Exactly. And we have to tell them, you are breaching also. You got the DVRO. The fact that you're both texting each other is, because women actually don't want to leave their partners. They love them. They just want them to change, so they'll find somewhere. Even when you put them in shelters and tell them that look, he must not know where you are, they will tell him the location because they want their husbands to find them and come for them, and they want a change, and things like that. They really don't want that total, cut off from them. So anyway, so that's what it, and then also you can that also can through court give you occupancy of the house with the children, and he needs to go out and find a place to stay so that he's not near you. So all those things are provided within that legislation within the DV decree. And the police stations can give it, and they can get it on the phone from magistrates. All those provisions are there. So people, when you go to a police station, if you're reporting acts that you want a DVRO, sometimes police stations don't even have copies. My branches have had to copy it and give it to police stations to assist them, to say, look, here, there's no more any excuse, we don't have any, and things like that. And a magistrate should be on call over the weekend, after hours, after working hours, and so on. And so there should not be any excuse. Magistrate is not in his house, or is not answering his phone or her phone or something like that, So that's one of the provision. And once you have that, you should have a copy. He has a copy. A copy should be delivered to him. He should, and sometimes that's another problem. We can't find him. Yeah. And he's mucking around the woman all the time. She can say where he is to be found. We just had a case, I think yesterday, my staff were telling me, the guy was seen all over the town, and the woman was being told that they can't find him. She said, come, so she actually went with the police officer and said where his car was and everything else. So, so often those are the excuses. One excuse we heard was, I don't have enough top up on my phone, and I don't have the money to top up the official phone. So therefore, the domestic DVROs are piling up like this because he needs to be delivered one ASAP and things like that, and always ask for a copy of it. And as soon as he breaches it, you need to call the police station. And the onus is on them that's a breach, and they can act on it. So sometimes they say, and he often does it on a Friday or a Saturday, weekend. And then the police will say, well, sorry, court is closed, Monday. So we cannot, but they can. There is provision for them to act on it immediately as soon as there is a breach. So remember that. And when all else fails, call the crisis center, 24-hour line. We will tell you what to do. Even if you're far away in Lao or Ngau or wherever you are.
I was going to ask.
Yes, we will be able to guide you. We'll be able to tell you who you can go to and things like that. And we can liaise with the police in your area about it.
Okay. So regardless whether it'll be a public holiday, let that not be an excuse.
No, not an excuse. Not an excuse at all. Never. And women need to know that, learn more about it. I would say to women leaders who are listening in, attend these workshops, learn about it, ask for workshops in your areas so you can then guide the women in your community, the women you are serving, and things like that. We all need to know about these things.
Quite often the questions that we also get are those who are around the abuse, or the families or friends or neighbors. What can they do? What can they do when they hear of this or they see domestic violence happening? Neighbors, we get phone calls here on the radio stations to ask, what do they do apart from just reporting it to the police?
Now before, the neighbors would ring and they would say, who are you? What's your father's name? What's everything. Now, anyone can report. Anyone can ask on behalf of someone for a DVRO and things like that. There's some complications there, but you can report and say, look, a woman is getting beaten, someone is getting beaten, screaming, there's yelling, this woman has been, you can do that. That's community responsibility, to your community. You can do that. So, and you don't need to reveal your name. You don't need to. You can just say, I'm the neighbor, this is what is happening there. And the police, their responsibility is to get out there. Of course, you'll hear, I got no transport. They want transport, crisis center can provide transport. We'll get a taxi, whatever. But that is often the excuse. They should be there and investigate. Whether the woman says no, because of course in front of the house, no, nothing is happening here. But, in other countries that I have visited and observed, that the police will just take one look at the situation. The state of the woman, the state of the house, chaotic or not, things like that. And they'll say, okay, can we go, sir? I'm taking you in for the night or something like that. And that can be done if we just put aside the brotherhood of man, and protecting each other, if we just put that aside. So these are the various things we can do as friends. If you know your friend is getting beaten up, she will try to hide it, she will unfriend you, or she will do all those kind of things. You still persist. Tell other friends, I think she is in danger, and intervene anytime. Never mind if it's 20,000 times and she still goes back to him. Keep intervening, but it's about, our survey says somebody's life, everybody's business, and that is what it's all about. We can all do our bit. And if you don't want to, sometimes people are scared that the perpetrator will come after them and harass them and things like that, then please call the Fiji Women's Crisis Center 24 hours. I'll always say, last recourse, is the crisis center.
All right. Well, there you heard it. Well, we'll take another short break right here on Gold FM Speak Your Mind. And feel free to also call up 3220906 and 3220907 or send us an email at goldfm@bc.com.fj. Speak Your Mind will continue after this short break. You're back on Gold FM, Speak Your Mind, and we continue to discuss the issue of violence against women. And, with me in studio still, the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. Now, let's talk about culture and the culture, our traditional cultures, as we say. We have, I'm often told that, we have these checks and balances in our culture. We have in the Toke culture the issue of the mbulumbulu, the process of mbulumbulu, forgiveness, asking for forgiveness, and quite often is utilized in cases of domestic violence. Now, how does this is a challenge to the work of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and how do you cope with it?
It is a huge challenge, and it used to be more of a challenge when we first started, because mbulumbulu was used for rape, for crimes committed against women and children mostly. No, it was used for that. And I always remember what Ratuchoni Mandraiwiwi said, a former judge and a chief of this country. He said at a meeting that mbulumbulu is to bring about peace between the two. The law must take its course between the two families, but not to excuse the crime. In olden days, rapists were clubbed to death. Never mind. I mean, very little is written about this, but you can find bits and pieces here and there. They were clubbed to death, rapists, and the chief would order that. But the mbulumbulu still took place. The ndalo, the pigs, the mets arrived. That was so the two sides don't continue the feud and have wars and things like that. But he was put to death.
Yes.
But nowadays, it's an abuse of that. It is to excuse the rapist and sometimes force the rapist to marry the survivor.
It's quite often that we find that culture is changed over the years to suit.
Yes, to suit the power holders.
Power holders.
Yes, the power holders, yeah. So, but, before when we first started, it used to be used as a mitigating factor when in court. Really? And we fought really hard against it. And so therefore, it is now no longer used as a mitigating factor. But sometimes we have heard, we have been told, and we have found it out to be true, is some police officers will tell the rapist, just go do the mbulumbulu. And in one case, the police actually went with the rapist, it was a gang rape, to take the mbulumbulu to the survivor's place. So that is against the law. You can report those kind of things. You should report those kind of things. So, and then if the woman decides not to leave, women know when they've had enough. They leave either when they are severely injured or the violence has gone on for too long and that she feels that it's harming her children, she's going to die one day and so on, So she knows when she will leave. And then the ndalo and everything else comes. The male members of the guy's family, he's looking very crestfallen and, very sad and stands there like poor boy. And then everybody else says, you're disrespecting culture if you don't go back. And the woman saying, no, I don't want to go, kind of thing. And they send her back. And that pressure, the cultural pressure is there. But I'm glad to see that less and less of that is happening. But in the rural areas, some of that practice still continues. I mean, why we talk about rural, in the Lami area, we've had recent case, and so it's around here also. It depends on the police station. It depends on the people who are there, and also it depends on the community who are, and how aware they are of the situation. The more awareness, the less of this is happening.
As much as the work that the Fiji Women's Crisis does in a community level, how do you feel about those who have started with village, rules, regulations, and that restricts, or who say that they have laws and regulations that will now discourage crimes such as rape, and how do you feel about the village bylaws that have yet to be enacted, but have actually been in practice in
Yes,
some places?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Village bylaws have their place, and it's for non-criminal offenses. I think. I believe that's what. Somebody damages us. Somebody's pig damages your cassava plantation, and how you bring about reconciliation and things like that. But we don't believe that for criminal offenses like child sexual abuse, domestic violence, rape, and sexual, those are not to be reconciled within that. In fact, women should be encouraged. And with the zero tolerance zones, zero tolerance to violence, that is an avenue that we can use if we make it work properly and effectively. That is one of the ways in which we can encourage more reporting, and which will then discourage these incidents. Everybody on the same page, saying this is wrong and this is how we're going to, this is how we're going to address this. But when you force women to reconcile, when you force women to forgive and to take them bulumbulu, that is wrong, and that can be a criminal offense. The other one is when you start saying that women should behave themselves in the village, so therefore do not wear pants, not wear pants.
Yeah.
And it even goes to the extent of they can't wear pants in town, or have them wininga only wherever you are.
Not to have your hair tied back.
Tied back and straightened and things like that.
Cut short.
Yes, so those kind of things. When you start restricting women's behavior, then you will see an escalation in violence. That I know in a village, and where this kind of rules were made, and women, and it is a very metropolitan town, like it's a jet set town. I'll say it. It's a jet set town, where women are going out to work in the tourism industry. They're in the salespeople, in the in the handicraft and all that. And so they wear the skirt and blouse. And there were guys who were waiting outside of the village, and they were threatening violence on these women if they did not change their clothes before entering the village. So that kind of ridiculousness. And my niece went into the shop that is next to the village, and she was told that she could not wear that short skirt. Do you know when you enter this village, you have to wear long skirts and things. So that is like, the threat of violence is there. People were actually threatened, things like that. So you cannot do that. That's against the law. That's against their basic human rights. Of course, there are social etiquettes that, we don't wear shorts and things, run around in the middle of the village. Just like we're lying down in our home here. I mean, if I'm in Tamavua lying down in my home, in my Sulu, and shorts or something, and somebody comes, I'll quickly put something around and go. You will put on a shirt if you, that kind of thing. So those are just etiquette. It's not like a rule. And the reason they gave us was if women wear pants, it attracts rape. And that is just a whole load of nonsense.
How do you feel with the criticism that is also leveled against you when you go out to communities that say that the type of work that you do is a threat to the culture?
Yeah. We heard that a lot before, but we have proven ourselves now. It's the men who want us in the villages now to raise awareness and so on. In fact, some of the traditional women's groups are now saying we are interfering with culture. There's a recently that I have heard, so I don't know where this is coming.
Did they explain?
I don't know, no, because this is supposed to be kept hush-hush, and kept hush-hush, and we don't talk about it like the way we are talking about it.
Oh, we'll continue again. It's getting a little more interesting now on Gold FM Speak Your Mind. Gold FM Speak Your Mind on its final segment, and we are continuing our discussion with the coordinator of the Fiji Women's Crisis Center, Shamima Ali. Now, in 2013, a survey was released by FWCC it took into account, it was a report on violence against women and the situation. Now, how has that been received? We've got a couple of years now that, how has that been received by the public and the communities that you have worked with?
Now, this survey was done using the WHO model, which is a standard model, and we adapted it to our cultural context and so on. And we partnered with the Fiji Bureau of Statistics
Okay.
to do this. They provided all the technical assistance and so on. So one cannot say this NGO went off and did
on
this.
its
And
own,
we don't.
no.
Yeah, so it was done very, very properly and and technically sound, and a wonderful analysis, feminist analysis of the violence, and a lot of information. We call it Somebody's Life, Everybody's Business. That's what we called it. And when we released it, the good thing is most people, I would say about over 90% of people, have really taken it to heart. So when you hear the Minister for Women, the government, anybody else saying 64%, that is from this survey.
survey.
This is from so it's being used everywhere. People have taken it as a credible report, and they are using it. The Methodist Church was the first to respond to it, and the maritime areas, they are requesting us to get out there because the highest rates were in the Eastern Division, where less services, and that's natural. Where there are less services, our presence is very little, and police presence is very little, limited. Those are the places where we had high rates. So therefore, very good response, and people are wanting us to get out there and raise awareness and do something about it. But the opposition has come, unfortunately, from some women's groups who are saying that we're meddling with culture, that this is all nonsense, that this is not how we should be dealing with it. 30 years down the line, we are recognized globally as a best practice model and so on. So that's, so it's a bit of an impediment, but the good thing is this is a small group of people. The rest of the people have come on board and are really wanting to do something about it.
Now, this Fiji still rates as one of the highest
Yes.
countries with the rate of violence against women.
Yes.
How do you feel? How do you feel that what kind of action that we need to take on immediately?
Well, one is we've got legislation that needs to be, how shall I say, implemented. Everyone on the same page. I always say a rights-based approach, that it's a human rights violation, not a welfare issue. And we're hoping that we can do that through the National Task Force on Violence Against Women that has been established by the Ministry for Women. And hopefully we meet regularly. And I think that is one area, how to use the legislation. The police force needs to get its act together. The communities are coming on board. We need to do a lot more of that. But women need to have services, accessible services. So we look at health centers, we look at police posts in the maritime areas, in the islands and so on, all that. So many things that we can do if we just put our minds to it. This is not a flavor of the month, that it's getting funding, there's a lot of funds, so let's run after the funding. And it's not about that, it's about people's lives. So we really have to get serious, know about it. We really have to learn a lot more about violence than we already know. And we are here to provide that. The Crisis Center can provide that knowledge, that information, and so on. So I think we really need to get our act together. We know our judiciary also, while some people are doing a very good job, we still have drawbacks within the judiciary, the traditional attitudes, and so on. So nobody is too high up to learn. And nobody's too low down to learn. We all need to learn about it. The schools play a very important role.
I wanted to ask about how do you feel about introducing a little bit more into the school curriculum?
Yes, we really have to do that. We used to have a lot more input into the schools, but now there are new rules and regulations, who can go in, who can't go in. So that is an impediment. Things become very political, about which groups can go in and not. And I think we have to put aside our politics and we have to look at what is best for our women, girls, and children and boys. So we need to get in there some human rights learning within schools, gender learning, talking about child sexual abuse from, in kindies and so on, and having appropriate programs for them, working with boys, working against bullying, because this whole thing is about bullying.
I was going to say that this all encompasses into bullying, into violence against women. Is not only about women. It's not a gender issue, so to speak. Because we're looking at the effects of these violence, what it takes away from women who have to go to work. How does that affect the economy? Women have to take time utilizing this hospital services. And that's, again, services being taken away from another who may need it. and
Police, legislation,
legislation.
the court time, all those things. Yeah, you take all that. A woman's, and also it stops women developing themselves and contributing to development. It exacerbates poverty for women. That's the whole cycle keeps her in that area. The children most probably will not go to school, so impacts on education, employment, high rates, all those things, criminal activities. These are the children who will run out on the streets and be influenced by other people into criminal activities and so on. So it's a development problem also, we all have to get on side. And men have such an important role to play. They must not take over from women. We must lead this because it's all based on our experiences. But men, and we have very good male advocates.
I was going to ask that too.
How we do it is very important, Padeli. It's very important the way we do it. And that's another program. I hope I can do it and bring some male advocates in.
I'm hoping for that too.
It's very important. And we have seen the results where men have gone through this training, 1, 2, 3 stages, and they're doing excellent work, and with women's groups in influencing men and young men and police who are our male advocates, how they respond to women. They are the best respondents, to women who go and report, and we get the report. So it's a very good program, and it's also seen as a best practice model. And that we developed, the Pacific Women's Network Against Violence Against Women, led by the Fiji Women's Crisis Center. We developed that program, and it is now other people are looking to learn from that.
Now, I'm going to ask again, have you also worked with the perpetrators? I know that there's the Yellow Ribbon Project with the Fiji Prisons Services, but is there work to try and see also and understand that culture, how to stop this culture and looking at the perpetrators of these violence?
At the moment, we do not have perpetrator, definitely crisis, because we have looked at it. It's really the hard yard. Very, very hard yet. But some of our male advocates now want to move into that area. And we believe they will be the best ones because they already have the grounding. So that is what we're looking at the next meeting in August of the men around the Pacific, of how do we, and we're looking at best practice around the world and then see how we can adapt it to Fiji. But some of the work is already being done with the correction services in Lambasa. Our Lambasa Women's Crisis Center with Sarah Mbongitini and her crowd out there are doing certain hours a week with the corrections people who, with the inmates who are there because of this kind of violence. And some of the evaluations, I have to say this, one of them said, why didn't I go? If I would have gone through this, I wouldn't be sitting here today. Another one came out and is now organizing workshops in his own village for us to go and conduct those workshops. So good results. It's a re-education of the mind. That's what it's about. It's not counseling.
As much as I want this to continue, sadly, time has caught up with us.
I know.
And we are due for another show, so I'll get that on record now that we'll have you back on Gold FM Speak Your Mind. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
And thank you again for joining us. And feel free to send us your comments on goldfm@mbc.com.fj. And make sure that you're tuned in again next week, right here on Gold FM. Monday.